I do not come here as an advocate, because whatever position the suffrage movement may occupy in the United States of America, in England it has passed beyond the realm of advocacy, and it has entered into the sphere of practical politics. It has become the subject of revolution and civil war, and so tonight I am not here to advocate women's suffrage. American suffragists can do that very well for themselves. We women, in trying to make our case clear, always have to make as part of our argument and urge upon men in our audience the fact, a very simple fact, that women are human beings.
Your forefathers decided that they must have representation for taxation many, many years ago, when they felt they couldn't wait any longer, when they laid all the arguments before an obstinate British government that they could think of, when every other means had failed. They began by the Tea Party at Boston, and they went on until they had won the independence of the United States of America.
It is about 8 years since the word militant was first used to describe what we were doing. It was not militant at all, except that it has provoked militancy on the part of those who were opposed to it. When women asked questions in political meetings and failed to get answers, they were not doing anything militant. In Great Britain, it is a custom, a time-honored one, to ask questions of candidates for Parliament and ask questions of members of the government. No man was ever put out of a public meeting for asking a question. The first people who were put out of a political meeting for asking questions were women. They were brutally ill-used. They found themselves in jail before 24 hours had expired. We were called militant, and we were quite willing to accept the name. We were determined to press the question of the enfranchisement of women to the point where we were no longer to be ignored by the politicians. You have 2 babies very hungry and wanting to be fed. One baby is a patient baby and waits indefinitely until its mother is ready to feed it. The other baby is an impatient baby and cries lustily, screams, and kicks and makes everybody unpleasant until it is fed. Well, we know perfectly well which baby is attended to first. That is the whole history of politics. I come to ask you to help to win this fight. If we win it, this hardest of all fights, then to be sure in the future it is going to be made easier for women all over the world to win their fight when their time comes.
You have to make more noise than anybody else. You have to make yourself more obtrusive than anybody else. You have to fill all the papers more than anybody else. Human life for us is sacred. But we say, if any life is to be sacrificed, it shall be ours. We won't do it ourselves, but we will put the enemy in the position where they will have to choose between giving us freedom or giving us death.
The early 20th century was the period where women started to become even more aware of the imbalanced rights between the two sexes. The matter of inequality led to Emmeline Pankhurst powerfully advocating her speech, freedom or death. The use of sentence syntax, rhetorical appeals, and meaningful diction helps Pankhurst convince the American public to fight for women's rights. Miss Pankhurst begins her argument by stating, "Women are human beings." However, she emphasizes that argument by adding 2 ampersands before that phrase. The fact, a very simple fact, she says, that women are human beings. This use of interrupted syntax highlights Emmeline Pankhurst's argument of men not understanding simple biology and that women are people too, and they share the same DNA as men. Pankhurst ends her argument by stating, "I come to ask you to help to win this fight." This imperative syntax engages the American public to take action. This ending of the call to action is effective in that it creates a connection between the author and the audience, which eradicates a barrier. Therefore, interrupted and imperative syntax is built by Emmeline Pankhurst and helps her argument. Additionally, Ms. Pankhurst used rhetorical appeals to further connect with the audience. She starts off her speech with, "Whatever position the suffrage movement may occupy in the United States of America, in England it has entered into the subject of revolution and civil war." Emmeline Pankhurst builds her credibility of a suffrage activist to highlight her experience of advocating for women's rights. This use of ethos connects both the audience and the speaker, in that the trust between the two is built because she uses her credibility from past experience of a successful activist. Pankhurst also utilizes logos by stating, quote unquote, "the fact that women are human beings." This fact highlights her argument in that even this, quote unquote, simple fact has been undermined by men. This statement helps the audience become rational about the situation by using logic and reason. The author is using logical reasoning and evidence to persuade the audience in her argument. Both rhetorical appeals, ethos and pathos, were used cooperatively to help Emmeline Pankhurst build her argument. Lastly, Emmeline Pankhurst utilizes connotative and concrete diction to strongly convey the importance of fighting for what's right. Pankhurst uses the word militant instead of activist because militant gives off the connotation of aggressiveness and violence, which is an overall negative tone word, while activist gives off the connotation of a person who is supporting a cause that is meaningful and long-lasting, an overall slightly positive tone. Militant is the best word to be used in this instance because it perfectly describes what men believed women in the suffrage movement to be: aggressive and too radical. However, when she continued to describe the ways that men believed to be militant, which was being jailed for asking simple questions in a public meeting, it showed situational irony because of how much men was favored. Pankhurst also uses the word lustily instead of the word quietly, because lustily gives off the connotation of loud, vigorous, and overall powerful, whereas quietly gives off the connotation of silence and soundlessness, which is the juxtaposition of what Emmeline Pankhurst is trying to convey. Lustily is the best word to be used in this instance to convey Pankhurst's message of being obtrusive than anyone else to carry out your goal. Thus, these connotative and concrete diction effectively carry Emmeline Pankhurst's message to the American public. By all accounts and with proven evidence, connotative and concrete diction, ethos and pathos appeals, and interrupted and imperative syntax worked cohesively to make Pankhurst the most effective speech. By calling to action, "Give us freedom or give us death," she helps the American public create the sense of justice and empowerment. Ultimately, this speech affected American history, in which it evoked many women to pressure the United States government to push for women's rights, even at the cost of arrest and death.